now.
No, you don't have to mute yourself. All good. Okay, let's go. So we're starting today on Pirkei Avot Mishnah 6. Now, this is a fascinating, fundamental Mishnah in all regards, whether it's from the historical perspective, or it is, sorry, my phone. Or it is just on the actual content. We might have to do this over 2 weeks because it's so fundamental and there's so much we could say about it. So let's just read through it. I'll do it in the Hebrew. You could look in English. Yehoshua ben Prachia. So we're talking about still the Zugot are the pairs. So the next set of pairs is going to be Yehoshua ben Prachia and Nitai Arbeli. These two giants. Yehoshua ben Prachia is the leader, and Nitai Arbeli is the head of the Avetim. Now they keep the Mayhem. Who did they receive from? They received from these two men, Yossi ben Yezer Istreda and Yossi ben Yochanan Israel Shalayim. Just as a reminder. And that's going to play in relevance to what they say in connection to their teachers. Now we're going to focus today on Yehoshua ben Prachia. This is a man that has some colorful history about him, which can be possibly very, very meaningful historically. In other words, his little deeds can have a lot of impact, and I'll show you. But before we get into that, I want to just read the Mishnah. It says like this: Asay lecha Rav. Make yourself a Rav. A Rav could mean a teacher, a mentor, or some type of master. The second thing is you have to acquire for yourself. So look at the difference over here. Asay, make. Number two is acquire. Acquire for yourself what? A chaver, a friend. One needs a friend. One should make themselves a master. And the third thing is v'havedan et kol adam l'chav zchus, and judge every man on the side of merit. Those are three heavy topics, all three of them, each in of itself. And the truth is, even the personality is a heavy topic, as I said. The person, Yehoshua ben Prachia. So let's focus in on Yehoshua ben Prachia for a moment. I will tell you a little bit about him. Yehoshua ben Prachia is, he lives about 2 or 3 generations after the story of Hanukkah. And the Hanukkah, if you remember Hanukkah, the Hasmoneans, or the Maccabee family, they had conquered, and Judea in the time of Hanukkah was ruled by the Greeks. And then, or the Syrian Greeks. And at the time of the story of Hanukkah, the Maccabees, of course, they went over, become victorious over them, and now the Jewish people rule for the first time in centuries over the land of Israel. However, the Maccabees, while as great as they were, and we celebrate Hanukkah, the story doesn't end up so great for the family, because going down in history, not all of them are as good as their forefathers. And they have this man by the name of Yanai. This man, by one of the great, a grandchild of Shimon HaMaccabee, HaChashmonai, who becomes the leader of the Jewish people after Hanukkah. There's a whole story behind him. One day we can maybe discuss it, but he's not a great person. Alexander Yanai, he gets the monarchy, becomes the leader of the Jewish people from his brother. His brother dies at a young age. He ends up marrying his brother's wife, who happens to be a tremendously great woman, a woman known as Shlomtzion Hamalka, who is actually the sister of the leader, one of the leading rabbis of the time, of a man by the name of Shimon ben Shaddach. Now, something interesting occurs, and Alexander Yanai, as the leader of Judea at the time, gets really upset at the rabbis because he does something again against the rabbinate, and he takes it out on the rabbinate. He kills many rabbis, and some of them have to escape, including Shimon ben Shattach and Yehoshua ben Prachia. Now, Yehoshua ben Prachia is the leader of the Jewish people at the time. Yehoshua ben Prachia and several other rabbis, they escape to Egypt. When they escape to Egypt, while there, eventually Shimon ben Shattach, who was his student, who becomes the leader of the next generation, sends a message back to Yehoshua ben Prachia that it's now safe for him to come back. and Shimon Meshach, he was also had to run away, but he had a little bit of protection because his sister was the queen. Shimon ben Yeshua ben Prachya leaves Alexandria, and on his way back, traveling back with his students, the Talmud tells us of a very fascinating story. He's staying in some type of inn on the way back from Egypt to Israel, and the innkeeper is very kind to them. And he says, the Yeshua ben Prachya says to his students, this innkeeper, the lady, the female, the hostess, she's a very nice lady. And one of his students replies, but her eyes are round. She's not very beautiful because her eyes are round. And Yeshua ben Prachya gets really upset at him. He says, how dare you think that I was talking about her physical beauty? I was talking about her behavior. And that's not the way that a student of a rabbi should be talking. A rabbinical student, we don't talk about we don't talk about the way women look. It's not appropriate. And he outcasts her, and he outcasts him, he excommunicates him temporarily. Now, this man comes to ask forgiveness several times from his teacher, Yeshua ben Prachya, and the first and second time he does not forgive him. The third time, when he comes to ask forgiveness, he's got this decision. The student has made a decision that if I'm not forgiven this time, I'm leaving, and I'm going to not just leave, I'm going to rebel in a serious manner. And the third time he comes to ask his student forgiveness, his teacher has intention to forgive him. But unfortunately, he was in the middle of saying Shema, and he hints to him just to wait a moment. When the student says, well, that's it, my teacher doesn't want to forgive me, and he walks out and he starts a idolatrous cult. That's the story of the Talmud. Now, the Talmud gives this particular student a name of Yeshu Hanotzri. Now, there's several Yeshu Hanotzris, which in the Talmud, there's about 2 or 3 in different eras, and one of those are supposed to be Yoshka Pandris, or as some people call JC, Jesus Christ. No, I don't like saying the second word, at least. Definitely what people refer to as the Christian Messiah, or God, whatever he is. So there is a possibility that it is that same person. But even if it is not that same person, this person ends up rebelling and starts his own cult of idolatry, and uses the greatness, the intellect that he has found and learned from his teacher, and uses it in a negative way. And sometimes when you have great and spiritual teachings and you use in the wrong way, it could have negative impacts. So as I say, it can be a very important story if this is the same Yoshka, as we refer to him, JC, of the Christians, but we don't know. Or not that we don't know, I just don't want to get into it because there's a lot of back and forth within looking in the history and the dates, etc. Nevertheless, it's an important set of rules, and this has a great impact on the teachings of Yeshua ben Prachya. And this is where the history plays in a big part of what he says. Look what he says. He says, I'm the leader of the Jewish people at the time, but nevertheless, what I did was wrong. And Yeshua ben Prachya recognizes his big mistake. So therefore he says, no matter how high you are in your position, no matter how great and spiritual you are, you always need to have a mentor. You always have to have somebody that is objective, that you can ask for opinion. Okay? And you have to have friends that can put you in place. And even more importantly, you have to always judge a person favorably. And he looks at the fact that even if you didn't believe, or he thought that he was wrong and his intention, you have to always believe. And you see from the story of how devastating it was when he misjudged this particular man, his student, and what a devastating impact that had. Okay, so that's putting it in the historical perspective. Now let's actually look at the Mishnah and the details. We'll focus on, it's interesting, the Rebbe, of course, comments on most Pirkei Avot, and he says that this Mishnah is talking about 3 types of people that we look at people. We look at some people that are superior to us, they're greater or higher level than us. We look at other people that are somewhat of equal level to us, and then we look at other people that are inferior to us. And this is teaching us in how we should look at all these types of people. He says, from those that are superior to you, if you have to find somebody that you consider superior to you in your level of spirituality and growth, or whatever it is that you're trying to do and to accomplish in life, whether it's in your profession or any other area, but particularly in your own personal growth, find somebody that you consider superior to yourself and choose that person, one of those people, to be a mentor. Okay? Number two is, for those people that you consider to be equal, you should make them friends, befriend them, and find somebody that you can have proper discussions with. And number three is, if you consider somebody inferior to yourself, that's when it's your job to judge them favorably. Okay, so it's an interesting way of looking at it. Let's look at these ideas. These important.
May I ask a question, Rabbi? There's just one troubling word there with acquiring the friend, kanad, like to purchase a friend.
Yeah.
Three erections.
Well.
For your behavior.
Any means that you can. I know it sounds derogatory to say that you should purchase friends, and we used to look down at that kid that had to buy you and give you lollies and whatever in order to make friends. But the Mishnah is saying that having good friends, get them however you can, whether it's by doing favors for them or get friends. It's that important. And friends don't just happen. You have to acquire them. You acquire them.
Well, so it's suggesting that friendship is transactional.
No, it's not suggesting that friendship is transactional. It's suggesting, well, you can say that, is it? I'm not saying it's not suggesting
Okay.
that. What I'm suggesting, more importantly, is that you should do whatever you can in order to acquire those friends, to get friends. In other words, the importance of friends it's very important. Well, let's discuss what this means to have a friend and the importance of it, and possibly through that we'll be able to 1 second. And possibly through that we'll be able to get a better understanding of the whole thing. Okay, so let's look at the first thing. The first thing is Asay Lacharav. Now, Asay Lacharav is really important because it's a mentor. What is a mentor? The idea is that if you have decisions that you have to make, or you have to have growth, you need to have somebody that you can have that you consider on a higher level to yourself, that can teach you and can be honest with you and can look at things from a different perspective. And both these things, whether it's the friend or the Rav, are there for that particular role. The role of being able to help you grow in your own personal service. This was, by the way, the Rebbe made this as one of his fundamental traits, the concept of Asay Lacharav, making yourself a Rav, a mentor. He said that he actually called, in his whole lifetime, thousands of hours of discourses and thousands of pages of writing. There was only one or two things that he considered what he called the bakasha nafshit, a soulful, like an essential request for his followers. And one of those was that they should find ourselves mentors, a mashpia. Find yourself that is in a high level. He said because a Rebbe is not, people would just write everything to the Rebbe. A Rebbe is not there to answer all your questions. You have to have somebody that can understand you, that can answer your problems, that can help you grow, that can be objective. This is the important idea, is that the Torah holds, and we say that Adam Korev Eitzel Atzma, if man is close to himself, which means that basically we're subjective. We could never see something in an unbiased manner. It's impossible. Anything that relates to us, we always will have some type of subjective outlook onto it, bias towards it. It's an impossible trait to say that we are totally unbiased. It just doesn't exist. The only way a person, and therefore when you come to critical decisions within your life, it's really important that you get an unbiased approach to it, an objective approach to it. Get somebody that's from outside to help you make that decision, that doesn't have all the emotional feelings and involvement with that idea. That relates to both concepts. So the mentor is a person that actually go and you request that help, and you ask them to help you make these decisions, and give you the guidance to see from different perspective. You tell them how the situation is, and they are able to mentor you in the right direction. The friend plays a similar type of role. The difference is the friend is just a listening ear, and it's somebody outside of you. The idea is that whenever you're going through any type of struggle and doubt, it is important to recognize that you are looking at it with your own eyes and your own perspective. And it's important always to try to get another perspective on that. But the weight of we discussed this last week a little bit about not over talking with your wife, and that's sometimes you don't have to overbear your spouse with all your issues, right? If they're going to cause her harm or damage or not be benefit to her, that doesn't help your relationships. It won't help her particular. So how would you do that? And then Mark Sarachik asked that time. So what about who are you supposed to confide in? And this is the answer. This is the connection to that. Confide in a friend. Of course, you should be confiding and having open discussion with your wife and everything. But if it's not going to be beneficial, and then you still should just talk it. But sometimes talk it over with a friend, and sometimes that friend is your wife, 100%. And but it should be a friend that you can talk with. But I think as important as the friend is, it's really important to have people that you can talk through issues in your life, that you can go through, and one person at least you should consider a mentor. It doesn't have to be one person for everything. You could have a mentor in your medical ideas and your health issues. You could have another mentor that helps you with your business ideas, another mentor that helps you with your spiritual life and your growth. Different mentors which are more superior to you. You're not a specialist in everything, and making decisions in everything just by yourself is not a healthy way to live your life. In every area of your life, you should find, so there's one mentor who's more of a spiritual mentor, but there's also mentors for your day-to-day mundane type of decisions. Should you buy this house or whatever it is, or should you go into this business deal? Those type of decisions, my good friend Clive Massell, Shelley, I can see, whenever I have questions that have to do with cars, I ask him, because I know that's his speciality. And I've learned my lesson that I shouldn't be doing this on my own. I'm just not that clued up. It would be a mistake. So these are those type of things that we have to be aware of. Okay. The next idea is, there's so much more that we can talk about this, but there's a statement from the Rebbe Maharash, the fourth Chabad Rebbe, that he would say, a person that does not have a friend does not have a teacher, and a person that does not have a teacher does not have a friend. In other words, if you want to have real relationships, you would need these type of people. You want to have a wholesome life, and you want to have good friendships and good relationships and a meaningful life, you would need both. You need to have those mentors in your life, and you also have to have those friends in your life that you can properly confide in. And what is a friend? A friend is somebody that you feel that you're able to confide within them your issues and your problems, and they won't judge you for it, and they'll be there for you. But on the other hand, they won't just go with whatever you say. They really care about what's ultimately good for you. And that's the meaning. There's another statement that in the Talmud that says, oy chavruta, oy matuta. Or you have a partner, a friend that you can talk to, or you have death. If you don't have somebody good that you can confide in, it's like living a life of death. You have to have somebody that you feel comfortable to be able to. Now, I wouldn't say that it's always so extreme, but it's the concept of having people to confide within and help you make these important decisions.
Rabbi, I need to interrupt at this point, because the one problem I have reconciling here is the role of counselor. Now, especially nowadays with mental health being a worldwide issue, so people go to therapists, counselors, Lifeline. I mean, there's all these services which have all the attributes you described. the unbiased, the unconditional listen, they're good listeners, they're trained in that. So how is Chaver in the Mishnah? I wonder if maybe back then there were no counselors as such, like the mental health side wasn't recognized. So maybe they wrapped up friendship and counseling into the one role. But now we've sort of unpacked and separated
It's
them.
not one role, it's two separate roles. It's two separate roles, it's specifically two separate roles. And I would say this, that, sorry, there's something on my glasses that is dirty that keeps on annoying me. I would say this, that the counselor is something that, you know, if you had a real mentor or someone that you could really discuss things with, and some of the people that you really listen to, not that you have to be like a total, like listen, like, a, you know, just only listen to them, but someone that you really feel is there for you and you could, and understands you properly. You would have time that you would say, I'm going through this emotional issue, and a proper mentor will say, well, this is something that you should be discussing with the counselor. And then for that idea, the counselor will become your mentor in that area. And that's an area of a mentor. But if you had a mainstream mentor that you had, that the mentor would be guiding you into the, you know, sometimes we do have mentors. You go talk to your rabbi, you know. The rabbi was not meant to be your counselor, even though many rabbis do that as well. But more importantly, they were there that people had mentors and somebody they talk to. And then sometimes the rabbi says, you know, this is something that I really think you should be discussing with the counselor. So it's another element of what it means to have a mentor. But you know, if this is a decision that you want to make on your own or whatever you feel you can, I don't know if counselors are always healthy. They generally are, but also choosing the right counselor could also make a big difference, right? You need to have the right counselor, the right mentor, and all these have a big difference. But let's go on a little bit further because we're running out of time, and I really want to touch on a few more points. Let's look at the last point, which is judging favorably. There's a famous story, I wouldn't say that famous, but a known story of the previous Rebbe, that when he was 4 years old, he asked his father, why is it that we have two eyes, one nose, and one mouth? And the Rebbe said, you have a right eye to look at others and judge others favorably and to look at your Siddur and your Torah books. And your left eye is to look away and to look at things mundane that are not so important. So the right eye should be your dominant eye. And you should always look with the right eye. And what he was trying to teach him is that whenever you're looking at another person, always try to find a positive twist. You know, the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, he writes that when you see people are doing something wrong, you should never ever judge them. He said there's never a case where you can properly judge another person. He says because whenever there's a time that you think that you can judge them, stop and you say, oh, that person's doing this wrong. There's always a reason what's causing that person to do that thing wrong. There's always a circumstance that can be justified. And whether you think that is a just reason or not, it doesn't make a difference. Your job, our job, when we see others, is to try to find a way to excuse their behavior. It doesn't mean that we should let people get away with abuse or not good behavior or discipline or whatever. But it's our job to look at them favorably. There was a story with, there's a Rabbi Gordon that lives here, Rabbi Yossi Gordon. Some of you may know him. He's got children, he's got siblings throughout the world. And just before, after his father passed away, his mother related to them the following story. She said that just before he got married, he went to the previous she went to the previous Rebbe, and she said, she was a young girl then, she said, I want to have a marriage tips from you. The Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, said, I'll tell you one tip, and that tip is that in every situation, no matter what happens, always try to find a way to see only the positive within your spouse. She related how that really carried her through all the issues that she always had. She always tried to find a way to excuse it and to find a positive twist, and she ended up having a beautiful marriage. But we end up often doing the opposite, and we always try to say, try to find ways to excuse, to look bad and to see the negative side. Try to find a way to look at it positively. So the Alter Rebbe over there, and the Rebbe takes it a step further. That not only that we should always try to find a way to look, but the truth is that when you look at the other person, there is something positive that's happening over there. In other words, the Rebbe would say, I'll give you a quick story, an example of this. There was once a man that came to the Rebbe because he had bumped into a Chabad guy on the street, and he told the Chabad guy, had asked him, do you want to put on tefillin? He said, I'm getting married to a non-Jew. Why would I go put on tefillin? The Chabad guy struck a whole conversation with him and convinced him that before he gets married to the non-Jewish person, he should go and have a conversation with the Rebbe. Anyway, he comes to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe tells the Rebbe, I'm getting married to this non-Jew, but I thought I would have a discussion with you about it. And the Rebbe stopped for a moment. He said, I'm envious of you. He said, why are you envious of me? He said, because the very fact that you have a test, a desire to do such an act of getting married to somebody that is not Jewish means that you have the power to overcome it. So whenever you see somebody transgressing, the Rebbe would say, not only that there's an excuse or there's a circumstances, but look at that person that's doing this act. That means that person has incredible powers and incredible strength to overcome it. And therefore, instead of judging them, see them as somebody with immense potential, the power to overcome all those struggles. So it's a different way of looking, not just looking at there must be a reason for what they're doing, but really not only that even what they're doing, there's something, they have incredible power, which is the reason why they fall into the trap is because they really have the strength to overcome that. Now, this is one of my favorite ideas. I used to say this about my grandmother, that she was totally non-judgmental. And what this means is, there's another, we're going to talk about, do not judge a friend until you reach his place, is what we're going to talk about in the future. But the idea is that in truth is we could never ever properly judge a person. We never have the ability to judge a person. So even though we do, the second we see somebody, we're automatically making some type of judgment on the way they look, on their facial expressions. That's normal human trait. But we have to recognize that none of our judgments are really correct. We really don't have the right and the ability to judge a person. We have no idea until you have lived the life of that person with all that person's background and what he's been through, what type of upbringing he had, what type of schooling he went, what type of DNA he has, what type of characteristics or trait he may have. You don't know what he's been through, what his makeup is, he or she. So how can you ever place any judgment on such a person? So therefore, it behooves us, even the people that we know best, we should not be judging. And we do this with ourselves, that we often, the people that we know best is ourselves, and we often the first people to excuse our excuse is our own behavior. When it's true, we shouldn't be bashing ourselves up. We should also be not too hard on ourselves. But the truth is, the good and the benefit of the doubt that we're giving ourselves, we should more importantly be giving to others. There's a lot more that we could say about this. We're just running out of time, but I want to just finish off with a few last points, which is this. I said to you, Asay lecha rav. It says, make yourself a rabbi. And I think the Rebbe would say, it's telling us, Asay lecha rav, make yourself into a rav. And there's two meanings to that. Number one is, don't ever look at yourself as somebody that, I'm not the most religious, or I'm not such a good Jew, or whatever it is. No, say, I'm the rabbi. Lift yourself up. Asay lecha rav, make yourself higher. Asay lecha, make for yourself rav into a rabbi. Another way of looking at it is, Asay lecha rav, when you study as though you're the teacher. Rav could also mean the teacher. Study like you're teaching, because when you have to prepare something to teach, you'll know it best. The best way to study is when you have to give it over afterwards. So study like you're going to have to teach it over.
Rabbi, may I suggest that I agree with you. In the current circumstances with isolation and lockdown, it's been imposed on us to do exactly that.
100%, 100%. And we had to raise ourselves, for those that did raise themselves up to the level and decide to become the rabbi and self-inspire is something that I'm sure benefited them. I want to just conclude with one last point. One just short story about this not judgmental, which I read today, and that is the Ksav Sofer, who was one of the great rabbis of the last century and a half ago, and he was once sitting at like a rabbinic meeting, and he bought this ancient, like 1,000-year-old coin that he'd been given, and he wanted to show it off. He was showing it off to the other rabbis that this the special coin. And in the meantime, it went around from person to person. Everyone was looking at it. And at the end, they said, "Oh, where's the coin? The rabbi wants it back." And they couldn't find it. It had been misplaced. Meantime, everyone got worried because it was very precious and so special. And the one person suggested, "Why don't we ask everybody to open their pockets and to check? Maybe somebody tried to steal it. Maybe we should check people's pockets." And there was one rabbi by the name of Rabbi Yehuda Assad, and he said, no, please, let's just wait. Maybe it will show up. And they waited and waited, continued the meal, but the coin never showed up. And they said again, like, let's everyone open your pockets. Let somebody go and check. Probably somebody stole the coin. And he said, no, please, let's wait a few more minutes. No, a few minutes later, as they were going to check, he couldn't push it off anymore. One of the cleaners from the kitchen runs in and says, "Oh, we found the coin. The coin was on one of the plates and got thrown out with the garbage." And they turned to this Rabbi Yehuda Assad, "Why were you so adamant that we shouldn't check people's pockets?" He said because he took out a coin. He had exactly the same historic coin that he had brought, also to show the people. He'd been given one as well. But when he saw that the Ksav Sofer, who was the main rabbi at the time, had also brought that coin, he felt bad, like he wasn't going to say anything about it. But then when it disappeared, he realized that if they're going to start checking people's pockets, they're going to say that he stole it. And he said, instead of putting myself under that pressure and being judged that I had stolen it, how was I going to get myself out of that? I decided that it would be better if we prayed, and I prayed that coin would show up. And I just prayed the time would, and it did. So it's just a lesson in how careful we have to be when it comes to judging another person. We should be so careful. And in today's age, where there's such great divides in the world, as we come closer to the time of Mashiach, the world is so divided in different perspectives. It's even more important for us to be patient and not jump to conclusions and judge people. Just tell you an example of this story that happened with Adas, that I'm sure some of you may have come across with their davening on Simchat Torah. That was another story of judgment that was in place. They had got permits for it and they sent letters out. Not that I'm saying what they did was right or whatever it is, but that's just an example, a recent story where I got messages from several people telling me, "Hey, look, is this what we stand for? Look what Adas did." I'm not saying what they did is right or wrong, whatever it is. The fact is that they had a permit and they send letters to all the neighbors. That's the fact. If anybody wants, I'll send you the initial letter that they sent out. But that's just an example of where anybody that doesn't know the other side of the story just jumped to conclusion to judge them. And I think that's wrong, no matter who it relates to, whether you agree with their position or not. We should never be jumping to judge people. Okay? And I think it's really important in our times when things are so heated and everyone is very, very emotional. Okay, thank you everybody for joining.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. Just
Thank
a quick question is
Sure.
like to appoint the Pasha Shoftim, so to appoint judges in Israel is one of the concepts there that there are specific people who are anointed as judges for the. One of the reasons is that the rest of us should not judge, is that we delegate the act of judging is to specific people who are authorized to do it.
Yes, but also there's those judges. That's a different type of judgment. That's a concept of there's actually an obligation to set up courts of judgment to come to conclusions and to avoid fight. But that even so, in those cases of judgment, you'll see that in one of the later Pirkei Avot, we'll see that it says when a judge, when the court case comes, look at both people as guilty prior to the judgment. But once the court case has concluded, you now have to look at both people, even the guilty side, as innocent. Okay, so in other words, you're only looking at them, judging them because you have to. Somebody has done something wrong. Somebody's stolen money. You can't say, "Oh, it's excusable. What can you say? What can you do? They're allowed to burn down buildings because somebody was shot by the police, and therefore you can do whatever you want." No, there's a place for judgment. You know what I'm saying? We need to still make judgments. Judgments have to be put in place, and we need to have a time for justice.
Well, the thing about that is those judges are judging in terms of their view of the law. They're not just doing it in their view of anything. They're doing it in their view of the law. Their view of the law, as we discovered, is also subjective to their view.
Right, and that's an important point, and that's a very valuable point. Well, what I'm talking about is that, what I'm saying is that there's a need for judgment, for courts of law. One of the 7 Noahide laws, as a matter of fact, is that non-Jewish people have to set up courts of law. Now, of course, you're going to have bias within the court case, and then you see the whole case going now with Amy Comey Barrett. That everyone's trying to say, is she biased, or does she have any bias? This is fundamental, and it's a very valuable question. The Talmud talks at length about this. I'll just tell you one little story about that, where there was one rabbi that was once he was greeted with shalom by a person that never regularly said shalom, hello, how are you? Normally they didn't necessarily greet him. And then the next day, this guy came to him for a case. And he said, hell, yesterday you just said to me shalom. That was something you don't normally do. You were trying to get on my right side. I can't judge this case. And he had to excuse himself from the case. So there is relevance to this concept. Okay? So,
thanks, Rabbi.
A valuable point. Rabbi. All right. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you very much. See you next week. That was good. Thank you. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye.
Thank you.